Thank you, Laskin Corla. And I suppose, look, just to say that the Housing Finance Agency Amendment Bill, the amendment to the 87 Bill, I mean, look, it'd be hard to oppose it. It's increasing the amount of finance available which is needed. The key issue is that it's at low interest rates. I don't know if if a portion of it's going from the European Investment Bank or on the private markets, or is it a mixture of both? I don't know, Minister, and you might outline that in reply. We are in the middle of a housing crisis like we've never seen before, and we really need to try and deal with it. And the cost of delivery and the speed of the delivery, I think, are key issues, along with the need for infrastructure, Minister. Water, electricity, wastewater capacity is it really, really important. And it's what we need to do. And there's a few areas where we can do something. And I would say this to you, I've raised it before and I'm going to raise it again here today. It's unfortunate that the two housing ministers have left the chamber. I've spoken to both of them before about it, along with with the other Minister for State from Waterford, in relation to it. And what I would say to you is that local authority housing, how they were built quickly before was we used universal designs, right? Universal plans, not just designs and standards. And the department officials have told me in the past, we're moving towards having universal design or universal standards for inside and all of that. But I'm talking about the exact same plan. The exact same plan, Ceann Comhairle and Minister, could be used in terms of for different family sizes, for different settings. So in other words, a two-bedroomed, two-storey urban unit, two-storey would be the same in Westmeath, where you live, and where I live in County Laois, or in Donegal or in Wexford, right? A masonette, a one or two bedroom masonette for a pensioner or disabled person could be the same again throughout the country. A 3 and 4 bed the same, and we need to do that. The fear of, and I'm not saying this by any way that we drop standards. The standard of accommodation, it has to be A-rated. That's not what I'm saying. This is not about cutting corners. This is about simply cutting out the nonsense and the cost. At the moment, local authorities it's costing between 11 and 15% to design plans for each housing estate that's being built in each housing development. They start with a blank canvas, and then pieces of paper get shuffled between the local authority and the Customs House, and that needs to stop. I will acknowledge that it has speeded up a bit in the last few years, but it needs to be cut out altogether. If you look at what's built in a lot of this city, a lot of those houses, if you go to Sligo, you see the same houses. There's houses like them in Portlaoise. I pass houses every day coming in here, and I lived in one of the very same as them in Portlaoise. No problem. So I'm not talking about going back to 1930s type housing. We can have modern housing. What I'm saying is, it's the same plan, and you don't hire architects. You shouldn't be starting with a blank canvas for every house that's being developed, or every small or large housing scheme. Universal drawings, universal plans, universal design for the different family needs in the different settings. That's what we need to speed up delivery and, crucially, to reduce costs. We're talking about it here every day. You can't reduce costs unless you mass produce. You have to mass produce, And do people really care up and down the country that the house they're living in might somehow look like the one someone else is living in Donegal? They don't. And the private developers are doing it to simply change maybe a little bit of the fabric on the outside of the front, or change the porch a little bit, or some other feature slightly to make them look slightly different. They're all doing them. I can see houses are being built by some of the big building contractors in County Laois, and the very same ones are being built in Dublin. They don't mind doing it, but the local authorities are sent off to get new plans each time, and we need to cut out that nonsense, and it needs to stop. And as I said, I've raised it with the 3 housing ministers. So I'd like to see that. And somebody might come back and tell me what's happening with that. And I don't want to hear that they're using standard, same standards internally and this and that and the other. It's the same plans we need. That's what's needed. In relation to speeding up delivery, that's actually crucial. And just in relation, if we just move to the budget for a second, that the budget. In the budget, and the document that the Minister read out, I have a copy of it here, that there's over 9 billion, and I welcome that, and I wish there was more in it, but it's good that that much is in it. But again, it's the value we're getting for that. And can I just highlight to you one thing, that there's 2 billion of that. 2 billion of that, according to the Minister, is for RAS and housing assistance and leasing, right? That's a huge sum of money. I understand why you would need to do that. We brought in rent subsidies, rent supplement back 30 years ago as a short-term measure, but now it's become the mainstay of providing housing for 100,000 households. So, you know, this is dead money down the drain every year, which we get short-term housing for, but we can pay it for years, we can pay it for 50 years. The state will not have any asset, doesn't have a tangible asset at the end of it. Could I also highlight to you that out of that 9 billion for housing, 9 billion plus, there is less than 1/3 of that actually going to local authorities, according to the Minister's speech. Less than 1/3 of it to actually build and buy. And that shows the shift. So over 2/3 of the money is going somewhere else. The money that we're putting in for social and affordable housing, over 2/3 is going completely somewhere else, instead of into that being the main focus of where it should go to. So just to highlight that to you, and I'm saying that because I'm concerned about the cost, I'm concerned about the speed of delivery, and I'm just concerned about time wasted, you know, jump through hoops that don't need to be jumped through. Could I just say that in that, you know, that if you take that 2 billion in RAS and HAP and leasing, you know, it's a substantial money to be, and the Public Accounts Committee done a report on this a number of years ago, and an in-depth investigation into it found that it's bad value for money. So I do think we need to change the dial and get the emphasis towards getting houses in place. With Laois County Council, for example, they have a spend of this year for 491,000, my apologies, 491,000 for HAP alone. And for leasing, and for taking leasing and all of the other things with it, you're looking at 14 million out of a budget of around 30 million for housing. So half the budget is going on temporary payments. You know, will go to landlords and various other outfits to just for temporary leasing and temporary renting. So that's the effects that it's having. You know, and it's money that we don't finish up with a tangible asset for, and that's not a good way of doing business. And we become overly dependent on that. The money for grants and the grant schemes are excellent. You know, the housing adaptation, the mobility aids, and the housing aid for older persons. I think there needs to be a little bit of flexibility around the housing aid for older persons, that I think once people hit over 60, you know, there should be, in certain circumstances, it should be able to reduce it downwards a bit instead of 66. But it's a very good grant, and hopefully there will be a second tranche of money there for it next year. I wanted to mention to you about cost rentals, and there's been a trickle of them, right? When you go outside the pale, it's only a trickle, and they're needed every bit as badly there, because you have a lot of people now in their 50s and in their 60s, and they're in private rented accommodation. They will not be able to. They're facing rent increases. Some of them now are facing homelessness because of the changes in the rent rules, and are being served with notices for vacant possession. And this is causing a real problem. But the issue here is, the overall issue here is that there's what I'm highlighting here is that there's a cohort of people who will not get a loan anywhere. Because of their age profile, and also, you know, their buying power, their income limits, and that needs to be. We need cost rental homes for those people and those families, and they are families in some cases, Minister, and they are single people. So in towns like Rathdowney, in towns like Mountrat and Abbeyleix and Greycullen and Portarlington and Stradbally and Mountmellick, in those towns in Portarlington, we need cost rental in those, not just in Portlaoise. There'll be a small few coming in Portlaoise, and they're welcome. But we need more of them cost rentals, and we need more affordable to purchase. We need to get back to the idea of allowing people to be able to buy their own home. And those costs can be brought down. And one of the things that we can do is to shave off the 11 or 15% straight away with this nonsense with design, new designs with every one we come to, every new scheme. Can I just say to you, and I'm saying all this in a constructive way, suggestions, right? I want to say to you about the finance and the money for building houses. There's a record amount of money on deposit apparently in this country. We also have record debts, okay? But there's record amount of money in savings, right? And we should set up, like, there was a state savings scheme set up, and perhaps we should be looking at, you know, a citizens bond, housing bonds, right? And if people were getting a couple of percent under investment on that, you know, it would be a great way of utilising some of that money. The backstop is the state. And I'm not talking about risky loans and throwing money around like we did, well, not like I did, but the way some people, the way thrown around by the banks and that during the Celtic Tiger, but in sound investments that we would, you know, allow money to be invested in sustainable housing schemes and in cost rentals as well. That's an issue, you know, and citizens' bonds. I think the government, it's an untapped source of wealth and money that's there that could be used for that. One question I have is, and the final thing I'll wrap up with, Laskin Corley, if you bear with me, is the unencumbered AHBs. I'm for the AHBs. There's a problem though. A lot of them have grown up now and come of age. And what I mean by that is the finance period. They're out of the encumbered period where they have a finance liability to the state. And they've come out now for 25 years in existence with such a scheme. And what's happening there is that some of them are now being managed by private companies, right? And there's an issue here arising. I've highlighted this to the department before. I don't know what's happening with it at the moment. And the three things that arise is this. One is who will own them. The second thing is that how will they be managed, you know, and will they be available to the local authorities to rent? In other words, if number 6, such and such a street comes available and it's with an AHB and it's out of the encumbered period, what happens? Does the local authority nominate the tenant to the housing body, or is the housing body free to do what they like and charge whatever rent they like? And that's happening along with hello money. That is also happening.
Thanks, Deputy.
And I'd like if some of the officials could come back to me on that. Thank you.
Deputy.